At this time, let's begin today's webinar, Transformational Leadership, Inspiring Extraordinary Performance in Times of Change. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today's session, and that is Tanya Shervoni. Tanya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. As Jessica said, my name is Tanya Shervoni. I'm a senior practice leader here at Canadian Management Center. I am going to moderate the conversation, and we have a great one in store for you today. And part of the reason it's so great is because joining me today is our very own Sherry Waddingham. Sherry is a facilitator with Canadian Management Center, and she's also an interpersonal behavior specialist, and she's got a background in employee development, strategic planning, and marketing. And Sherry's worked across a variety of organizations across industries in both the public and the private sector. She also holds an MBA, and she's an ICF credentialed professional certified coach. And I could go on and on because she has a vast experience. But suffice to say, Sherry really knows her stuff, and I am certain she's going to be able to share some powerful insights with you today, which actually reminds me to just reiterate what Jessica said. Please use this time to bring your questions forward and to interact with us today. We really want this to be a dialogue, so please use the chat panel. Only Sherry and I can see those questions, so feel free to start posting your questions. We'll attempt to answer them as we go along, and if not, we've got a few minutes reserved at the end for a Q&A. Now, just before I hand the floor over to Sherry, just a couple of things I wanted to mention, and the first was a welcome to any of you who are new to Canadian Management Center. We are a national organization dedicated to prepare the next generation of leaders to thrive in tomorrow's marketplace. And one of the ways that we get ideas for the topics we select for these webinars is from the feedback from folks like you. So please, we encourage you to take a moment at the end of this webinar. You will be prompted with a feedback survey. Let us know what's of interest to you. How can we be of service? What topics would you like us to present? We are also on Twitter, so please follow us. Our handle is @Canadian Management, and feel free to tweet any insights you get from our conversation today using our hashtag CMC events. And the final thing I wanted to mention, and just to reiterate that, yes, this session is being recorded, and you will receive a link to that recording after our session, and that recording will include the visuals that we are presenting. Now, with all of that said, I am happy to pass the floor over to Sherry, and she's going to kick us off by talking about the areas we're going to focus on as it relates to transformational leadership. Sherry, over to you.
Thank you, Tanya, and welcome to everyone who's here today. I'm happy to be with everyone. So on our first slide, what we're going to look at here is just what we're going to cover for the next hour. We're going to look at 3 styles of leadership so that we can put a framework around not only transformational, but 2 other types we're going to talk about, which is transactional and transitional leadership. We're going to talk about the circumstances that you would want to think about before you apply which style. And nobody's in any one style all the time. So let's look at when does it make the most sense to use these styles. We're going to give you a number of real-world leaders and examples so you can realize that transformational leaders show up all over the place at all different types of levels in an organization and all different types of organizations. And then the last thing we're going to take you through is 4 steps to help you become a transformational leader in your own workplace doing what you're doing today. So one thing I always like to do when we get on any topic we've got a wide group of people is to get level set on what we're talking about. So Tanya, let me ask you, what comes to mind when you think of the term transformational leader?
Well, it's a big word. I think of very motivational, inspiring leaders. I would think of folks like Martin Luther King, or perhaps in the corporate arena, people who've really been game changers. So someone like a Steve Jobs, for example.
Right. And those leaders are definitely transformational. And there's many of them that a lot of us are well aware of the names. They're visionary, they're inspiring, they've done great things, they've been inventive, they've moved mountains, they've had great trends that they've created. But those aren't the only types of transformational leaders. Those are really, really big shoes to fill, and that sounds really intimidating for the most of us. So what we want to think about is that transformational leaders are everywhere. They're in every organization, in every community, in every environment. And really, it's about how they think and what they do more than just being famous. So high-profile leaders are important, and we need to have great leaders, but there's visionaries and transformational people at all levels of the organization.
I got to say that comes as a relief as I hear you say that, because those are some big shoes to fill. So I guess we're going to hear a little bit about how each of us can be more transformative.
Yes. Okay, so when we look at a pure definition of transformational leadership, what are we really talking about? So you want to think of it as two things. It's the how we're leading as leaders, and it's also the what we're doing that makes it transformational. So when you think transformational leadership, you want to start with that sense that these people have a vision of something they're trying to create, something that's compelling, they're passionate about, they want to bring to life. But what's also important about them is that they work with their teams and people to bring those visions to fruition. They're not demanding it. It's not a commanding. It's not a top-down. It's very much a, we are going to create this future. I may bring the vision forward, or maybe even you do, but we are going to work as a group to bring the vision to life. Most of the time, you will see transformation and the skills of transformational leaders brought to life during times of change. So change can be sudden, it can be disruptive, it could be significant, and it requires leadership skills that are then different we may have thought traditionally. So strategies, thought processes, ideation. It's not just get the work done. So it could be large scale, long term, and it could be short term successes that need to be achieved as well. But change can come from many, many different places. So it can come from within the organization. So you may want to do a reorganization in your team. You can be bringing a new technology or a new process into being, or setting a new strategic direction for the organization. An example would be when Amazon went from being just an online retailer to entering the whole world of web services. It could be a change that's imposed on the organization, a merger, a scandal, a public relations disaster, God forbid, or it could be something that's like we're living right now with a worldwide issue. So we would talk about the coronavirus, for example. If you think about the transformational leaders in China who literally put a hospital together in 10 days. So that would be an example of someone who had to take a really current topic and think fast. And yes, they followed some of the learnings from the SARS hospital, but they had a whole different environment within which to work, and they had to adapt that to the new environment with where they are and where coronavirus is and how it's affecting everyone. It's also needed in smaller organizational startups where things can be sometimes chaotic and you're not sure what you're trying to do. You just know that you're there to change the world. So some of these things are super fast. Some of these changes happen gradually. Some of them take a long time to implement. So let's look at an example of an organization that's actually gone through a lot of transformation, but it's taken quite a long time for them to do it. This is Nancy McKinstry. She's the CEO of a company called Wolters Kluwer. It's a Dutch-based publishing company, and they were traditionally known for producing medical and legal and financial reference material, so hard print, hardcore printing. When Nancy looked at the organization, she's like, the world is not print-based anymore. People are going digital, and we need to get on board with that digital publishing. So she's managed a transition, and it's taken that organization from a print-based organization to digital publishing, but it's taken 15 years. So she's managed the transition that's taken them from about 30% of the company's revenue coming from digital products to 91% as of last year. And in the last 3 years, their stock price has almost doubled.
That's really impressive, and I would imagine that there are many of us in situations where we kind of see that there's a need to change, but it's a question of how to manage that change, how to lead the change. So what I'm hearing you say with the transformational leadership, it's not just the what, like the visions, but it's also the how. So it's really both of those pieces together.
Right. And if you even look at their website today, interestingly enough, moving from the digital services, they're now moving to expert services. The front page of their website has all information for everybody on the coronavirus. So keeping on top of that trend and trying to evolve with the times as well. But we're all dealing with some form of pressure to change, just like the publishing industry.
Yeah, actually, in fact, we have a poll question for all of you right now. We'd love to see where you are with change. So, what kind of change is your organization facing? You see, you've got 5 different answers on the screen. You should see a poll question launch in front of you. The one thing I will remind you is to click the submit button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Otherwise, we won't get your response. So if you could take a moment to do that now, that would be great. So I'm taking a look here. I would be really surprised, Sherry, if we have anyone saying, no, they're not facing any change. They're fine, fine the way they are. I want to go work for that company. It sounds like it would be a really relaxing place to work.
Right.
Jessica, if you could go ahead and close the polls. We'll see in a moment where people are at. It's going to just take a moment for it to pop up. I'm guessing that most people are facing somewhere between, gradual or major transformation. I don't know. What do you tend to see in our?
I think most people would say that the constant in their world today is change, and we're seeing a lot of that with a lot of different clients. And it really is just the nature of how we work today and how things are growing and building and the pace with which we work.
Yeah, and there we go. Here are the results. So it's a really close tie. So 50% at gradual transition and 46% are experiencing major transformation. And we do have some 5% at major disruption. So any surprises there?
No, I would say that's pretty much what I would have expected to see for people.
Well, you guys are in the right place because we have a little bit more to say about those types of changes.
Okay, so transformational leadership, obviously a lot of you based on the poll here are going through a lot of changes. So what does your organization need? What level of change do they need? What level of leadership do you need to bring to the table? So let's look at that. With the constant change, sometimes it's more gradual. It isn't these grandiose, all sweeping changes in an organization. And some of those require a little bit slower pace and a little bit longer time. And I would say, just like the example I showed you previously from the print-based publishing to digital publishing. So let's look over to the next page, which we're going to talk about, which is the style is called Transitional Leadership. Now, I would say for the majority of you, a lot of what you're going to focus on is transitional leadership. This is considered change that builds from what is already positive. So in other words, we're not taking something and throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It is a modified version of transformational leadership and embraces change, but leveraging what you already do well, what you know works in the organization, and perhaps enhancing that or elaborating on that or adding to that. It's incremental versus it being fast or that it needs to be done really, really quickly. So it's things that you do every single day. You might be improving effectiveness in your area or implementing new processes or systems, creating and growing teams, bringing new opportunities into the organization. And it's generally, when you think about transitional leadership, because it takes a longer period of time of your leadership skills and the change itself takes longer, it's a little bit easier on your team, because it's not so much extreme change that can throw people off and get them off their game. It lets them have a little bit of time to absorb that change and a little bit of time to incorporate the learning from it and what's working and what's not. The third type of leadership we're going to look at here is called transactional leadership. And this is really about rewards. If you want to think about it, it's rewards and consequences. I hate using the term punishments because it's not really punishments, but it's a very much like a carrot and stick kind of style that we would have seen over time. It stands in very stark contrast to transformational leadership. They tend to reinforce the job of the status quo, keeping things stable. We're not looking to introduce change and innovation. We want to make sure that we're following policies and procedures here.
So it sounds pretty traditional or old school. Is there still a large role for transactional leadership today?
Yeah, and the thing is, there's some parts of everybody's job that are transactional in nature. whether it's just you filling out your expense reports or doing timesheets or making sure that your teams are doing those sort of things. They have to be done correctly. So they have to be done on time, and you have to make sure they're accurate. So that would be a transactional leadership function. What you don't want is that's not an environment, though, for innovation and creativity. If we're just directing activities and don't go outside the box and don't do things differently than we've traditionally done them, you're going to have people being a little less innovative and creative. However, we don't want that in every single job. So if you think about regulatory bodies, or where we're trying to follow safety protocols and procedures, or if you're in an agency that inspects airplanes for safety violations, now's not the time to be creative. So, we want to be in an environment where it makes sense, and this still exists today. But if you're in an environment where you need to be creative and innovative and think outside the box, the transactional leadership style may not be your best choice for that environment. Okay, so we've got the three styles. Let's think about which one do I use and when do I use them. So what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to walk through the three styles, and I'm going to ask you, or I'm going to give you three descriptions, and I want you, being the audience, to just think in your mind which style you think this sounds most like, and then I'll go through the answers towards the end. So the first one here we have, my organization is stable with clear goals that require compliance and strong individual performance, above all. The second one, my organization is going through or needs to go through substantial long-term change. And lastly, my organization performs well overall, but some change is needed to improve performance or prepare us for the future, something that's coming down the line. So in your own minds, I'm hoping you've been thinking about the three styles you need here. And let me give you the answers now. So the first one, obviously, based on what I was just talking about, is the transactional nature. So it's individual performance, may be a little less team-oriented, but this is what we do, this is how we're structured, this is how we get the job done. The second one would be transformational, because the key here in this one is substantial change. It's long-term, you need to change, something in your world has changed, and you need to change to keep up. And then the third one would be transitional. So we need some change, but we don't need to change everything, and we certainly don't need to throw everything out and start over. It's just something that needs gradual improvement.
I wonder, Sherry, and first, just for the record, I got 100%. I got
Good
them
for
all
you,
wrong.
Tanya.
Okay,
I'm proud of you.
Alex in the chat panel made a comment. He or she said, transactional leadership sounds like a bit of an oxymoron. And I guess it's because we don't necessarily associate leadership with some of the more, sort of policy and compliance. And so I don't know if you have just a comment to that comment.
Right. So I do understand what you're trying to say. There's still going to be leaders in an organization, but they're following a given set of principles and rules that may be required. If you're a government regulation body, you're still going to have leaders in the organization, but they may be battling for something that's not creative or innovative. It's how do we follow rules and protocols. A lot of times organizations are mandated to do something for a specific reason. It has to be done. It has to be implemented, but it's not given a lot of variety and room to move within it. So you have to implement those protocols the way we're telling you to do them, but we still have to have somebody to oversee.
And that might be even tougher today, right? When people they want to have space for creativity. They're not necessarily used to respecting authority just because of the hierarchy. So you may actually have to be quite influential as a leader, I would imagine, to sort of enforce compliance and explain the why it's so critical.
Yeah. And sometimes it is the leadership role comes from how do you keep people motivated,
right,
in environments where they're constantly having to do things that may be repetitive or in strict guidelines where they can't go outside the box. So maybe in that environment where you're bringing your leadership strengths in terms of team building or consensus building, communication, that sort of thing.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you, Alex, for your comment. Please keep the comments and the questions coming because that's what helps add color to our conversation today. So on to our next slide. Ooh, this is where we learn the steps to becoming a transformational leader. Okay, I'm listening.
Right. So first of all, let me start off by saying this doesn't mean you're not one now. We're just trying to give you some steps to help you structure and think through, okay, if I feel like I want to be more transformational in my role, what are some of the things that you need to watch out for or pay attention to? Keep in mind, as we're going through the 3 styles and the little exercise we just went through, nobody is a transformational leader all of the time. It would be really, really exhausting for you and for your team if every minute of every day you were expecting to be transformational, because at some point you would be changing your own changes. So you want to really think about, you're going to change styles throughout your day, throughout your week, but where are you going to need to pull on your transformational skills? Are the things that we're going to talk about now. So the situations that are going to require change, or you to push the envelope, or you've been seconded to a new team and you have to work on some new change initiative in your organization. These are the things that are going to probably require you really to pull forward your transformational skills.
And I think this is perfect timing, because we got a question from Haley who says, do you believe that people can be different types of leaders in different scenarios? How do you lay the groundwork with different reports if conversations need to be structured in different ways? And I think that's part of what you're talking about, assessing when it is that you need to adopt one style over the other.
Yes. And how do we lay the groundwork with direct reports?
That part is maybe a little less clear.
Yeah, Haley, if you want to just give us a little bit of clarity on what you mean by that, I'd be happy to answer it.
Okay. So, yeah, I'll take a look at what other questions that are coming in here.
Okay. So the first step is, and this would be true no matter what initiative you're working on, but when we talk about transformation, because you're creating something that is either very different or it is brand new, you need to start with that vision. And you're talking about where we're going to go. What are we going to do with this? And it's no different than you seeing your company strategy or a vision. So what are you trying to accomplish, and why are you trying to accomplish it? People need to know why we're doing things, because you're just going to get the, oh, great, another change. We don't want to do this again. We've had enough of these already. So the inspired vision is really the first step, because if we don't know where we're going, any road's going to get us there. So we want to make sure that we're really following that. The second thing we want to go through is assessing your organization. So what skills are going to be needed for your transformation or your transition, and who's going to have those skills? It won't always be you, and that's fine. Not everybody has to have every single one of these skills to get things to move forward. The third one is, okay, so within these strengths that I have, how can I contribute best to this? How can I lead, and where am I going to have to go get some skills to close a gap in an area that I may not have, or that somebody else is better at than I am, and they would be the right person? And the last one is to find a match. So where's the intersection between what you can offer and what your organization needs? Now, this is just for you personally, the last one. Obviously, you're going to want to do that depending on who you're bringing into this team. But we want to be really, really clear that you've got to start with a clear vision.
And I would just comment here to Cam, who's asking for some ideas on how to be inspiring, or how to demonstrate transformational and transitional leadership in an environment that's very transactional, health and safety. So I think maybe as we talk it through some of the stories and the examples we have, that might come to life a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Cam. Okay. So let's talk about developing your inspired vision. This is the first skill that we want to talk about. And I don't want people to get overwhelmed by this. It's a fundamental attribute of being an effective leader, and it's critical to leading change. We're going to talk about many leadership competencies today, but some are going to be more important than others depending on the situation. But without a vision or a sense of where we're going or a clear direction, we're going to really stall and we're going to get stuck. So if anyone is the one that you want to keep top of mind, it's here. It means you have to be really clear on your own vision that you have in your head and be able to articulate it. You have to communicate it. It has to be compelling, and you have to be able to motivate people to get them to follow you and to want to be part of and involved in your vision. Now, it doesn't mean you have to come up with a vision by yourself. Remember, transformational leadership is about inclusion and involvement and bringing the team into the fray and getting them involved in everything that you're trying to do. It's not you trying to do everything by yourself all the time. And nor are you expected to have a brilliant flashing bulb going off in your head all of a sudden. It doesn't usually work like that.
Well, that's kind of good news, because I think when I hear creating a vision, it feels kind of daunting. I'm not sure that I would know how to do that if it was all reliant on just myself.
Right. Yeah. And it's oftentimes the vision isn't necessarily how to reorchestrate the whole organization. It could just be something in your own team or your own area that's critical to the work that you're doing. Oftentimes I have people just start with the things that you know aren't working. The things that you sit around in your teams or even to yourself and say, you know what, if we just did this differently, this would be a whole lot better than what we're doing now. That in itself is you starting to create the vision to, okay, so if we change this, how would we do this? How would we go and make this different? It doesn't have to be too up in the air or too over your head.
So it's actually thinking, so because we had a comment here by, I might mispronounce the name, Burned, who says, the key insight is to less to aspire to become a transformational leader, but to be able to switch between different leadership styles and execute them depending on what the situation, company, employees require. So when you're telling that story, it's kind of like recognizing an opportunity. If things are broken, there's an opportunity maybe to bring some transformational leadership to the table and be open to innovation, for example.
Yes. And he's saying it's less to aspire to become. If you don't feel that you are, obviously that's one thing you definitely want to aspire to learn to have in your toolkit. But it's not, you're going to, it's very highly unlikely anyone's going to be a transformational leader all of the time. And nor would you even want it, as I said before, because you'd exhaust yourself and everybody else. Okay. So the second step we have here is assessing your organization. So you have, at this point, we're assuming you have the clarity on your own vision and for your team and for your organization. Now we're going to look at identifying what skills are needed and or are lacking in the particular context within which you're working, because maybe you don't have all the necessary skills for what you want to do. So what does your organization need? So we're going to show you a sampling of skills here that are going to come up on the screen. And it's a sampling of them. It's not all of them. And they've been very important in a lot of business transformations and in other organizations that we have seen. And I'm sure you've used many in your own organization.
So I'm just going to stop you there for a second, Sherry, because there's about, I think, 9 on the screen. You said it's just a sampling. So again, that's quite a few leadership skills. Presumably, we're not going to be strong in all 9 and the other ones that are not included on the slide.
Right. And you don't have to be. And you're not going to have to use every single one of these for every single situation that you're in either. But they're not all equally important for your situation. They're equally important, but not for every opportunity that you're looking at. So, for example, if you're a large organization with lots of silos, organizational alignment and knowledge sharing is going to be critical because it can make or break the transformation success. If people aren't talking, they're all doing things to their own, they're not communicating, we got, a million ships going in a million different directions, we're not going to reach the shore. So we've got to do the things that are going to make sense for us and our organization at the time.
And it's interesting, one of the skills that we don't have listed, and I'm just curious, I'm looking at the chat panel, and I'm sorry we can't get to all of you, but we'll try to respond in the Q&A. Folks are talking about the need to have difficult conversations. So Haley talked about difficult conversations around budget cuts or redirection of the team. So in addition to team building, there may just be the ability to have difficult or critical conversations. This is just generally a really important leadership skill, especially in times of change.
Right. And particularly with change, people's reaction to change is all different based on individuals. And their first reaction generally, their immediate reaction to change is usually not positive because they'll go into, this isn't going to work and it's going to be worse for me, this change. So yes, as leaders, the ability to communicate the change, get people behind it, but also to be able to have those conversations with people that are a little less comfortable with change or at some point are refusing to come along and don't want to get on board with what's happening, for sure. It's a critical component to any leadership role, I would say.
Yep, and in fact, we'd like to hear from you. Again, we'd like you to engage with us in another poll question. So what would you say are your organization's or at least your team's top needs in terms of the leadership skills that you are needing to bring to the table? So I'm going to give you a second to read through them, and then just remember to click submit on your choice, because we've got a wide variety here. And I would ask you to select up to 3, because as Sherry said, they're all important in different ways, but if you were forced to say the top ones, what would be those top 3? So if we could just close out the poll, Jessica, that would be great. And I guess it's, I'm looking at the list here, I'm having a hard time anticipating. I guess it's really situational. I'm thinking change management will be pretty ubiquitous, but I could be wrong. And as I'm looking at the chat panel, and people were talking about difficult conversations, Haley was talking about, you can't be friends necessarily as a strategy to get people to come along. So that has me think of just emotional intelligence, knowing how to interact with people at different levels of the organization and to influence them. But we're going to see here in a moment what the result. Oh, wow, what a almost even spread. Okay, it's kind of almost hard to see in the lead. Okay, so leading by only 3%. At 38%, we've got knowledge sharing and retention, followed by change management, and then followed closely by collaboration. So those are our top 3. But both adaptability and strategic planning are also strong. But there really isn't one that isn't important, which I guess kind of gets to the point that you made, that every situation, every organization may be in a different place with all of this.
Yes, and it'll also be affected by the size of your organization, the type of work that you do in your organization, and how much of it is internal clients you're going to be servicing versus external clients that you're servicing. So yeah, it's a very interesting breakdown.
Yeah, and for those of you who might have struggled, because I know we don't have time to go in great detail about each of these. If you struggle to assess what's really required, I will mention that I will be talking about a program that we do have on transformational leadership, and one of the things we do is help you understand what's required. So stay tuned if you'd like to hear more about that. But before we get there, we have some great examples to share.
Okay, so we're going to look at a few examples from all different levels and organizations and all different countries. So the first one we're going to look at here is somebody who's pretty prominent and well known, and she's an executive of an organization. We're looking at this person first because it's fairly straightforward to see how top-level leaders contribute to large-scale transformation. But I want to reemphasize that transformational leaders are needed at all levels of the organization, not just at the very, very top. But this individual sits at the top of an organization. So Tanya, any idea who this is?
I'm going to say that the organization is Pepsi. Am I right so far?
You are.
Okay. And so this is Indra. I'm going to not get the pronunciation of her last name. Nui. That's it. Yes.
Yes. So Indra Nui was the CFO and then the CEO of Pepsi. She was at the organization for 24 years, so she's had quite a successful run there. She's grew the company from 2.7 billion to 6.5 billion. Her sales are up 80%. So she had a long and successful run there, her and her team. She did not do any of this by herself. When you look at the organization, so what are some of the things she did to transform the organization? She's quite strategic in the way she looks at business, and she's if you ever want to research her or look her up, there's a lot of information of her on the internet. She's very well credentialed. She's very well educated, but she's also very strategic and really cared about the people in her organization. When she took over, both as CFO and CEO, she moved the organization away from this focus so much on what we would call junk food into healthier snacks. Because she watched the market, and that's what customers were demanding, smarter, healthier foods, which ultimately in that strategic decision led to the spinoff of Pizza Hut, KFC, and Taco Bell, and into the acquisition of the Tropicana, the Quaker Oats, and the Gatorade. She had a lot of pushback in doing this. People were like, well, hey, hang on, what are you doing? This is things we've done in the past. Why would you shake this up? But she said, listen, it's based on our analysis and our data. It's the fast food restaurant business is not where we want to be here, and we need to part ways with these organizations. So she used the money from spinning those off to buy the other, from spinning her traditional organizations off to buying the Tropicana and the Quaker Oats, which then bought Gatorade. This then allowed her to look at their portfolio of offerings and say, how do we want to look at our food that we're offering? And she broke them down into 3 categories, which was things like fun for you, better for you, and good for you. And fun for you would be like potato chips and pop, and good for you would be like oatmeal. So she's trying to get into the trend and the move to healthier foods. One of the things she really noticed when looking at their business was that they were missing something for breakfast because Pepsi didn't actually create anything that was helping people with their breakfast meals. So then that's when they brought into the oatmeal, which they serve now.
I have to say it's kind of brilliant, because I know I find myself feeling really good about eating Sun Chips, for example, because I feel like they're just that little bit better for you that I can justify. Maybe not for breakfast, mind you.
Right.
Yeah, but it's a good one.
So it's really taken the organization to where they want to be. They're not, I mean, obviously they're still growing and they're not all the way there yet, but they've got a lot of initiatives in place to help with people. In 2006, they started their whole Performance with Purpose initiative, and they focused on profits, yes, but the products, the planet, and people. So in other words, we're not going to produce at any cost, and regardless of what damage we're creating as an organization. They made the Ethispheres Institute list of the world's most ethical companies for 13 years running. She's also considered one of the world's 100 most powerful women, and she's been on both Fortune and Forbes top most powerful women lists in a number of years. So she's done really well for herself. So that's great, but let's look at it from a skills perspective. So what did she do? What did she do that was transformational? What skills did she bring to the table to help her and her team become so successful? So we look at her and say, well, she had a vision. She knew she wanted to change from, fast food and junk food into more healthier options, and looking at how we can serve our customers throughout the day. She was both adaptable to the changing needs of the market and to customers, and then had the ability to put that strategic plan into place to help them get there. She was able to anticipate the changing market, and then she was able to adapt and to hold her ground when people pushed back and said that's probably not the smartest move, but she decided strategically it was the right thing to do. I've done my analysis. And then, of course, bringing the team together to get things done. So she's showing a number of transformational leadership skills in her running of Pepsi and her successful time there. Okay, so you're saying, yeah, but that's great. I'm not in the C-suite. So how do I become a transformational leader? Well, we show you examples to be inspiring and to give you some other food for thought, but everybody's not in the C-suite. Anybody can be a transformational leader because it's not about rank. It's about mindset and behavior, and it's about the ability to know where you want and or need to go, and to be able to energize those around you to get there. It's more about breaking the mold of what is to create what can be. So that can be done anywhere and at any level. Business transformation, first and foremost, focuses on middle management and team leaders to get things done, because they get done on the ground in those areas, and we need people who can initiate reforms at the top, but throughout the organization. So then how do middle managers lead from the middle? So if you look at the top of this first bullet that's going to come up, it says 2/3 of change initiatives fail. And we know this is true even in strategic planning, that a lot of strategic planning that we do and a lot of strategic initiatives fail as well. And that's usually because of the lack of execution. Well, the executives who come up with the vision and the ideation need the team members to come with them to execute it. Nobody can execute anything on their own today, let alone large-scale changes in organizations and transformations that need to happen. So it's critical when the people who are in the day-to-day and closer to the work, and I'll always tell leaders this, the people who have the most innovative ideas are people who are on the front line of your organization, because they're the ones who are looking at the work every single day, seeing the problems, and talking to the customers. They're not all going to come, you're not going to come up with every innovation and idea in a boardroom somewhere. It has to be through all the organization. So mid-level leaders can look at initiating changes and solutions. They are responsible for aligning things to get them done. As many of you mentioned in the chat panel, talking to your teams, well, you're the ones who have to talk to those people and hopefully get them on board. And then coordinating all the things that need to move and all the problems that are going to come up when you're actually trying to execute and get things done.
And I think, there's some Manish and some others in the chat panel who are commenting about the resistance they see to change, people being afraid that they will lose their jobs. And so I think what I'm thinking of here is just the criticality that communication gets cascaded to the managers who need to have the conversation, because if people, in the absence of information, people are going to make up stories and, in terms of what's going to happen. So
and there's going to be monsters under the bed when they don't know what's happening. The more you can communicate with people, the better. Now, people will tell you, oh, we already get enough communication. I don't want more communication. Well, I would err on the side of over-communicating versus under, because people don't look at every single thing you send out. And the more you can tell people, the more you will help to alleviate some of those fears. You're not going to eliminate them entirely, because people find transition and change challenging, and it can be upsetting for people. But it's a matter of constant communication and keeping your door open so that those who are fearful can come and talk to you when they need to.
And I know we have some examples of some middle managers that may help address some of the questions that came in around how can you influence change from the middle. So here is our first example.
Okay, so this is Michelle. She's a real person. So I don't want to actually give you her name. She's not famous or anything. So but she does have a job, and she will, in her story, you will recognize what a lot of you are looking at. So she's a nursing supervisor at a large public hospital in the United States. And they were struggling, as many hospitals are, managing a large volume of patients. And there was yet another change initiative introduced into the organization, and the people were frustrated and cynical, and I don't want to change, and this is another flavor of the month, and I don't want to hear this, and everything we try to do fails. And what she said is, listen, I'm tired of seeing patients suffer. I'm tired of feeling like we're not doing our job and we're not living up to who we can be and the best care that we can be giving the patients. So I think the best thing we can all do as the nursing staff is get on board and try to give this our all and try to do the best we can. Her speech with those people really helped them understand the need for change, which I think may have been missing. She then led a 70-member working group to streamline and improve patient flow, and her leadership led to dramatic reductions in emergency room wait times and doubled the rate of patient discharges. So she had the vision, but she also had the team building and leadership strengths that were just as relevant to get those people on board, to get them engaged, and to get them inspired to be part of the solution and to want to work with her to put the changes through rather than just sitting back and being frustrated and complaining. They really got themselves where they needed to be. Her personal mission statement and vision statement is to encourage and inspire others to action and forward progress. Make personal and professional decisions with balance and thoughtfulness so those around me and myself feel proud.
Yeah, that's interesting. We got Manish again saying, so does that mean we need to keep emphasizing the good and the future benefits till people start seeing the results? Is he or she clear in their understanding of that?
Yes, and also the why they're doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, because if they don't understand the why, they're just going to think it's just another change in it. It's just another thing you're doing to frustrate us. It's just another thing that we have to add to our plate of things to do. And I would also encourage on that one to start communicating as quickly as possible any wins that you do see as you're starting to implement the changes. Because if they actually see progress, that'll be quite motivating for people.
And that's a good point, because I think a lot of times there are intentions of people that want change, and then when nothing happens, it just sort of builds the cynicism that, okay, this is just another thing that's not going to actually happen. So that's a good point.
Yeah. Our second example is Paul. Paul is in the United Kingdom, and he's a factory floor manager. And his organization was, they produce cosmetics. They were creating an enormous amount of waste. And they knew it was a problem in the organization throughout the production process. and they knew they were doing harm to the environment, and it was also costing them a lot of money. They knew things were wrong. The management knew there's something wrong here. Why are we creating all this waste, and what are we supposed to do about it? But nothing was changing. So what Paul did is he took it upon himself to simply ask everybody to collect all the waste they produced over the course of a week. And he had them gather it and put it all in the same place. At the end of 1 week, they had generated 40 pallets of faulty products and trash. And so everyone's looking at these 40 pallets was quite startling. And visual aids in wanting people to change are often very effective. And what it did was it got people out of their sense of complacency and said, hey, we really need to do something about this problem. So he put a team together and gave them a 6-week deadline to come up with solutions. And because he did that and he empowered them, within a year the company had reduced costs $1 million. And he says the big thing is it was a cultural shift because they took it on and they owned it. They felt accountable for creating the waste that they were creating, and then they took the ownership of figuring out how to find a solution for it. Good for him. He was later promoted to the production director, but he said, I'm not going to just sit around and waste. We got to do something about this. What are we going to do? And it was quite a good experiment for him.
Yeah, it's a very inspiring story, powerful one. I just want to address a question from Jackie. So we talked with Manish about the importance of emphasizing the good. You mentioned making sure people understand the why and celebrating accomplishments. So we've got Jackie saying, should we be addressing potential loss too? So I guess in some instances with change, there could be a downside. So how, any words of wisdom on how to communicate around that piece?
So yeah, my take on this is yes. You're also going to get direction depending on how big the loss is. You're going to get direction from the executives about how much you can communicate. So obviously we don't want to violate that. But I think if you make everything sound cheery and rosy, people don't believe it. So when we look at surveys of employee satisfaction, oftentimes they will say if the leadership are too positive to a point of avoiding talking about problems we all know exist, we then don't think they're credible. So I would encourage you on the things that you can discuss that are going to happen, I would, because it then makes you obviously seem transparent, which is also good for your own credibility as a leader, but it helps people know what is there rather than creating monsters or creating things that may be worse than what actually is going to happen.
That answers your question, Jackie. Thank you for your question. Now we're on to step 3.
So step 3 is about evaluating yourself. And this is where you're going to be honest. You don't have to tell anybody the results you found for yourself, but you're going to look at your own strengths and skills and say, where am I strong? And where would I like to develop some skills in a certain area? And you're probably doing this as a course of your regular development anyway. But in the 4 steps, the one we talked about is your leadership strengths. So we've gone through the developing a vision. We've talked about what does your organization need. This is where you're going to match your own strengths and skills with what's needed for that change. So be honest, tell yourself the truth. If you're not the strongest at a certain component that you believe is needed for your organization, then you want to bring somebody in on the team who is, or another colleague. And if you know you're really good at something, like oftentimes with leaders, they're good at understanding their team. They're good at understanding emotions on the team and how to communicate. So we might say you have a really strong sense of emotional intelligence. That's what you're going to bring to the table as part of this change. And to know that and to own it. And don't hide it. Don't hide your strengths, right? Always own your strengths. But bring those to the table so that you can help move that forward and move your organization and the initiative forward.
And I guess sometimes it's challenging to do that self-assessment. So this is where asking for feedback or going through assessments and things like that can be useful.
And where's your passion? Always look to your passion, because if you're passionate about something, chances are you've got some skill or talent in that area.
And speaking of passion, I guess this is where it becomes the match between what we're good at and what we need.
Right. So we're going to find the match with the intersection between your strengths and the organization needs, and how are you going to flex that? How are you going to bring that transformational skill to the forefront? And you want to do that on your own. You're going to have to think about this a little bit, but it's a really good exercise to do. And I think most of us, if we're good at something and we're wanting even to develop it, even if we're good at it now and we want to be better at it, working on it is the best way to do that. So that's how you can bring that skill to the forefront and what you have to offer to the organization.
Yeah, and speaking of developing skills, I want to just mention quickly that on this topic, we do have a program aptly named Transformational Leadership, How to Inspire Extraordinary Performance. And one of the strengths of this program is you get an opportunity to work with someone like Sherry to help diagnose what is needed in your organization and your team and to complete a SWOT analysis, um, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and to also create a 90-day implementation plan. So if you're not quite sure where your strengths and your opportunities lie, this can be something that's really useful.
Okay, so why don't we just review what we've talked about today, and then I think we'll have some time for questions. So we talked about transformational leaders and how they go about bringing skills and strategies to create substantial long-term change. And we also talked about the transitional leaders and how they will be needed in times of things that are maybe more incremental or take a lot longer to execute once we get them done. We've talked about strengths that contribute to transformations. Everybody needs the clarity of vision, which is key, and we talked about that. Why are we changing? Where are we going? What are we going to do? But critical to both of this is leadership and management skills. It's fine to know where we're going and to manage our skills, but we've then got to put a plan in place to get it done, which is oftentimes going to be more of management. Is it happening? Is it getting done? Where are we on our timelines? How can we move this forward? And then we looked at things like strategic planning, team building, and being adaptable and flexible. If you learn nothing else from this, as leaders today, everybody has to be more flexible and adaptable for the environments and the things that are always changing. And remembering that whatever style you bring forward, whatever competency you want to bring forward, whatever strength, is going to be dependent on the situation that you're facing and what specifically applies to you. And then, of course, the 4 stages of becoming the leader: clarifying the why and the vision, assessing your organization, evaluating yourself, and then, of course, finding the right fit.
Great, and thank you for that. We have some time now to answer additional questions. So if you didn't get a chance to answer your question, you can ask it now. I do see that. I'm just reviewing here. Give me 1 second. Oh, Ray, I guess this was more of a comment. He was saying that we still need to regularly review how things are done, even in a transactional environment. I would say absolutely. This is a good one. I'll throw this over to you, Sherry. How do I find the time to do the strategic thinking that's required for transformation? I spend my day firefighting, and then at night I have to do my job. So I bet you, give me a yes, those of you who are with us still in the chat panel, if you can relate to that question, finding time to be strategic instead of firefighting. Oh, yes, lots of yeses are coming in.
Yes. Popular question, yes.
Exclamation marks, capitals. Okay, we hear you.
I'm always putting fires out. Yeah, okay. So some of this is posing questions to yourself and then just letting them go. So because you can't be, it's not like you can sit down and say to yourself, I'm going to be strategic from 10:15 till noon. It doesn't work like that. So you want to keep track of ideas and thoughts that you have somewhere. You also have to pose a question to yourself about something you want to solve or figure out, and then just let your subconscious brain work on it when you're doing your daily job. And then you'll see questions and ideas. Things will pop up to help you do to bring some of the ideas and solutions forward. The other thing is, remember what I said. This isn't all on you. So everybody has to contribute in your team. Everybody has ideas, and oftentimes the team has more ideas because they're frontline, and they can bring in ideas to the table. The firefighting is a bit of a starting to get your team to start solving some of their problems on their own. as leaders, what I want you to ask yourself, and I don't know the answer to everybody in the group, obviously, but think about yourself. Do you keep saying the same questions over and over, or do the same people keep asking you the same questions, or is the same problem coming up? In which case, you're solving symptoms, not the core problem, and that ends up, I find, being a lot of firefighting time, or sometimes putting the questions and problems back to your team to come up with some of their own solutions and ideas, and them bringing them to you before they bring you the problem. Because people are very quick to bring the problem without any ideas of solutions. So these are all just to buy you some more time. But it is absolutely a big challenge for everyone today. I fully recognize that. And sometimes you may just have to block out some time for yourself just to go for a walk and think. It's as simple as that. I know it's tough.
Yeah, it is difficult, and I find also one of the things, it shows up in many of our courses, is being able to say no diplomatically. Sometimes, you get this pressure to be responsive and you want to be a team player, but being a team player doesn't necessarily mean being reactionary and always saying yes and then robbing yourself of that more strategic response. Let's see, we got a lot of questions and we're running short on time, but there was a question from Alex. How do we find out the why if communication from above is lacking?
You have to ask I'm assuming they're the ones who need to tell you why it's happening. I literally would go and say, I would speak to the executive team and say, it's critical we know why we're doing something. It makes it really hard for people to execute it. The other thing is, if people don't understand why they're doing something, they have a hard time being able to implement or make decisions on their own. That's why they may be coming to you all the time. If I don't know why I'm doing something day to day, I can't make an independent decision because I don't know the outcome or the implications of that decision. So I would try to push back on the senior executives as much as you can, even if it's to your direct boss, and say, somebody's got to give us some whys on this. Otherwise, it's going to be really tough for my team to catch on.
And we'll go with one more here, the next one in line. Henry is asking, how do you keep the momentum of your team in the journey of transformation?
That's a tough one, but what you could do is plan when you do the execution of it, plan things along the way to keep reminding people how well it's going. Small successes, small wins, small celebrations. Let them own some of it. Don't you take it all on. So if you're going to have a team that's going to work on celebrations, let them plan some of them. You don't own it all. And I have literally had teams of 100 people plan celebrations, and I literally gave them like $1,500, and you wouldn't believe the stuff they came up with. You can give them no money and tell them to be creative, and they will come up with some great solutions. So get everybody involved, but don't forget it's not just about the work. It's also got to be about celebrating and even just building teams, and just talking once in a while is helpful.
Amen to that. We do have a couple of other questions, but we're running short on time. A couple of things I wanted to share with you. We will try to respond. We'll take a look at those questions that go unanswered and look for some responses in your follow-up email. I want to thank you so much for your interaction. I want to ensure that for those of you who are looking to develop in this area, to let you know that beyond the Transformational Leadership course, we've got a bunch of other courses. So we've been talking about all kinds of skills. Some of you are struggling just through your questions around being more strategic. So we have courses like developing a strategic mindset, collaborating. Some of the folks talked about silos. We've got collaborative leadership skills. We've got a ton of programs. So, of course, you can visit our website or call one of our training advisors. We also have free resources at cmcoutperform.com, so be sure to take a look at what we've got in there, articles, videos, blog posts, etc. Some of you are also looking for PDUs, so wanted to let you know that Canadian Management Centre is a global registered education provider with the Project Management Institute. So here's the information you need to claim your PDU, and if you don't get it all down, I will be showing this slide again at the end. But in the interest of respecting your time and ending on time, I want to just say thank you to all of you for joining us. Thank you for your interactions. I want to thank Sherry for all of your insights today.
My pleasure.
And answering all these questions. And again, we'd love your feedback in the feedback survey, and we really look forward to seeing you on a future webinar or in one of our courses. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day.